Welcome to Random Editor Facts that you may not have known in Geometry Dash. Let us begin. After playtesting in platformer mode and passing a colored checkpoint, the checkpoint loses its color, and it will be regained after you select and deselect the checkpoint. The arrow of a normal speed portal is actually slightly wider than the arrow of a fast speed portal. You can press F3 to toggle preview mode. When using a mode trigger with free mode enabled, it is possible for you to die by hitting the ground as a ship or UFO in reverse gravity. When using the rotate gameplay trigger to point to the direction that is south, you can create a sort of horizontal ground climbing motion. Note that if you playtest the actual level like this, it won't kill you. You'll just clip into the ground. Stop triggers cannot stop shaders. The spider pad actually has the largest hitbox among the pads, and the yellow pad has the smallest. The tips of the arrows of both dash orbs actually go past their hitboxes. Weird things can happen to the hitbox of a block when you warp it. When you warp it vertically, the hitbox visibly stretches horizontally but shows no signs of rotation. When you warp it horizontally, you can see that the hitbox stretches and rotates. However, this rotation will not actually take effect. If you look closely, you can see a sort of line dividing this particular saw into two different segments. Note that this does not seem to be the case for its smaller versions. Likewise, in this particular saw, you can see that it is divided into 4 parts by 2 different lines. This is not the case for its smaller versions as well. In the delete section, you can now use the find group ID filter to search for objects with that particular group ID. Even though it says the triggers are part of the details filter, if you try and select all of these triggers and use that filter to delete, it will only delete the keyframe and the counter label. The toggle trigger is the only trigger in the list of triggers whose main trigger color does not turn green when selected. In a similar fashion, the toggle trigger is the only trigger whose body is unaffected by any alpha value. Even when you have no touch on custom pickup coins, the level will still require you to collect them to verify. Rotating the guide trigger will not rotate the camera guide itself. When placing these pulse objects, the 2 smaller variants are actually a little bit higher than the large variant. Even if you have show hitboxes on, it doesn't actually show the hitboxes of these 2. For some reason, for some slopes, when rotating the slope, the hitbox of that slope doesn't get rotated as well. For longer slopes, however, it works perfectly fine. Part of the grid or the entire grid itself can disappear when the camera is rotated during playtesting. For some reason, even though the gameplay offset trigger doesn't have a move time slider, it still has a duration line. If you look closely at the insane difficulty face in the editor, it looks like its left eyebrow has been clipped. You can make a simple set of stairs without making the player rotate on it by doing the following. First, pick an object that makes the grid a tiny bit smaller. Move it down by 2 small steps and 2 tiny steps, and then you can repeat the process until the 3rd step, in which case you can just move it like that. And as you can see, we've created a set of stairs that doesn't make the player rotate when it escalates. As you can see, I've made an example here that showcases this very well. I've actually showcased this quite a while before on my channel. You can crash the game using a rotate trigger by doing the following. So first, have some blocks that you want to rotate. You can set a group of rotation, set it to no touch, and copy and paste that if you'd like. Set a center of rotation. Set the rotate trigger, let's say for example 90 degrees. Set the appropriate values. And it will rotate like so. Save and exit. Go back to the editor. Swipe again. Select your blocks. Disable no touch. And your game will crash. When selecting a color trigger, the red and blue parts turn black. When duplicating it, only the blue part is restored. As of 2.2, the only color you cannot select immediately from the select color menu here is the object color. You can only access it through the object itself that uses that color. When clicking on the plus sign on a special color like player color 1, player color 2, or light background color, it will give you an empty color edit interface. When selecting an object from the interface that has a default color of black, it becomes white. For example, I click on this spike and you can see that it becomes white there in the selection. Its default color is black. This, for example, does not turn white when selected because its default color is the object color. You can see the same applied to examples like the monsters, where their default is black. When messing with overly scaled objects like so, their collision may not work properly. You can easily fix this by selecting Extended Collision, and it will be fixed as so. The mouth on the smiley face object is actually curvier than the mouth of the sad face object, as observed there. In some cases, when you are moving really fast and you have two background change triggers close together, with the last background change trigger being the default background, it will not actually take effect. As you can see, it changed background but did not change back, even though it should be activated because it's not touch triggered or spawn triggered. Reset triggers may not actually reset checkpoints. The hitbox of this particular spike is actually similar to the hitbox of these three other spikes. The hitbox of this spike is actually a tiny bit larger than the hitboxes of these three other spikes. And the hitbox of this spike is actually a tiny bit larger as well, but that is more visible. For some reason, even though the hitboxes of these two blocks are full blocks, the hitbox of the thickest variant is slightly different, even though they are all in the same tab. And what's weirder is that it can cause some weird movements, like so. This will also apply if you playtest the actual level. For some reason, when placing these particular slopes, you can see that it will be a tiny bit misaligned. Slopes in platformer mode are by default quite slippery, as you can see here. To avoid this, you can check Grip Slope in the checkboxes section to disable the slipperiness. In the event trigger, even if you have hit head checked, hitting your head against the slope may not actually count, as seen here. The spider teleport event also includes usage of spider pads and spider orbs. In the editor, using a static trigger, you can force the camera to follow a block that goes past the left barrier. However, if you playtest the actual level, this will not work. You can crash your game with S-blocks by doing the following. First, what you need is a dash orb. Any dash orb is fine. Next, place your set of S-blocks and activate No Touch. Now this means your S-blocks will be unusable. Save and exit, go back to the editor. Now disable No Touch. And when you try to delete the S-blocks, your game will crash.